So, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to ask the panel just to quickly introduce themselves to you and explain what their companies do, because I want you to all understand their different perspectives. And then we're going to start talking about enterprise idiots. Shall we start down the far end, please?
Hello, my name is Neeme, and I'm a CEO of Entify. Entify is a KYCB, so it's like know your business customers, and we are coming from Tallinn, the Skype city, and our mission is definitely to change the point of view how you should treat your customers and how you should do with your compliance. Either you are the bank or the small company from, I don't know, anywhere. If you buy shoes from China, we make you compliant.
Please.
Yes, Jean-Francois Heering from Vadis Technologies. We are a RegTech based in Brussels. We don't produce data. We transform data into insights and actions for our clients on risk level. So we analyze financial risk and non-financial risk for clients on partners and supplier sides.
Please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Russell Perry. I'm the founder and CEO of Kompany. We're a regulatory technology platform providing business verification services in more than 200 countries and jurisdictions. And when we talk about business verification, we're talking about using reliable and authoritative data to ensure that you can verify the companies and the people behind. And we usually provide the services to the financial industry, but also to insurers and insurance industry, etc. But it goes way beyond what we call the regulated industry.
Thank you. And Luc.
Good afternoon. My name is Luc Querton. I'm the CEO of Altares, which is a European vendor of analytics and technology, enabling our clients to make better and informed decisions by means of utilizing data and analytics to basically boost their sales and marketing efficiency, to also control their regulatory compliance, and to mitigate their risk scoring risks.
Thank you very much. Right, so let's start where we left off with the last panel. So the suppliers to enterprises. They were saying the big transition they see in the technology is this shift from static to sort of more dynamic processes. So I wonder if you could illustrate that with a couple of practical examples of the kind of services you deliver to some real businesses. You don't have to name the businesses, but if you could just give people a couple of practical examples of what that transition actually means in practice. And any of you, please.
So we're in a unique position, right? Because when it comes to the business verification, the data is very, very important. And when we're talking about static data versus dynamic data, there's two parts of that. Dynamic data is really about having the information at the time that you're conducting either an onboarding by clients, corporate clients, business clients, or there's a change in the account, or if you want to have active monitoring. So if we look at a specific example, if you have a German bank which is active in multiple jurisdictions. Until now, they've been relying on static database information. So pretty much a database where there's information about companies. But in order to be compliant and also to make sure that the risk is always adjusted to the snapshot today and now, it's very, very important to know what is the status of that company now and who are the people behind it. Can you also ensure that this company and the people behind are not violating sanctions?
What do you do? Where do you get the data to do this from?
So
the way we database, or
so we're not a database, right? So we're not a company database, and our dynamic data comes directly from the primary sources, from the commercial registers, the government registers, the financial authorities, and the tax authorities, and always at the time that a financial institution is onboarding a client, exactly at the time that they are conducting business with their clients. And this is fundamentally different, but it's also required by the 4th Anti-Money Laundering Directive in the European Union, the 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, which just went into effect now on the 10th of January. The data that is used for verification has to be reliable. It's also considered a requirement that it is from a primary source. And primary source is directly from a register or a data source that is accepted by the financial authorities.
So like, let's say I've got SAP or something, and I'm going to bring Entify on as a client, right? So somehow I feed that to you, and you tell me this is a real company, they're not sanctioned, blah blah blah. You tell me that.
Yes. So not only tell you, not a yes and no, but provide the data as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And that is essential with the documentary evidence. That means you know if a regulator would then come, for example, and say, oh, how did you check that company? You can say, this was the source, this is the timestamp, and I used unaltered information that provides a guarantee that at that time the data was correct.
Look, please.
But that's the compliance play, Russell. I would actually contend the fact that we can turn this compliance burden also into a business opportunity whereby you have this car leasing company that used to basically reject a number of applications for leasing contracts because there was some suspicion around fraud behavior behind the company that was applying for the leasing contract. With dynamic models, tapping into the repositories of data that we make available to clients, and you, of course, in this specific example, that car leasing company has been able to increase its application acceptance rate by 20%. That means that they've better managed the false positives, which has, by definition...
What are these data sources you're talking about? I mean, I'm still trying to picture, this is like LinkedIn or something, or what?
No, similarly to what Russell described and what my peers here do, we tap into repositories of data that are available worldwide. We correlate the data, sanitize the data, and on top of that, we build layers of analytics, which enable then to cater for the specific needs of our various clients over the world.
Jean-Francois, give us some practical examples of what you guys do.
Yes, it's maybe also to take another point of view. Before, you were rating a company only on financial information. It means that you are working with financial statements, with publication all the year. So working there with static data was quite okay, because the information was published every year. Now the shift is going from a pure financial view to a compliance view, where you speak about compliance, you speak about information about people, about sanction list, about media. So then you have to have access to the information quite quickly, because when a sanction is coming out of the market, you have to be warned immediately, and you cannot wait 1 month, 2 months, 3 months to have the information there. So it's also because what the companies are looking for their partners is shifting from a financial view to a more compliance view, that this dynamic data is more needed today.
Absolutely.
Can you give people a couple of examples that are not financial? I mean, because one of the things I'm thinking about is what can people in the financial side learn from non-financial businesses?
I would definitely like to add on that because the situation where we are right now in regulatory places, the financial instruments, they are struggling actually with their customers to find out compliance from their side. So the problems are pushed down to their customers to actually to do the same thing for them.
This is know your customer's customer.
Exactly. So it's if you're like a first line bank, now you only accept your customers when they are doing the proper KYC and KYC procedures as well. So now we get more and more those normal companies who is dealing with the international way in a global basis. And the example I want to give is the one Latvian company who was pretty much in the market doing the chemical goods. They had a provider from Ukraine. From 15 years, they went to sauna every day, every year. They was good friends. One day, that Ukrainian company got in the sanctions list. What happened? Latvian government gave that Latvian company fine for 2 million euros. And the bank who was transferring that money got final warning. So that is where we are right now in regulatory basis, and we are pretty much challenging the regulatory as well.
So, and are we stuck with this, or do you think we'll be able to get around this with Bitcoin in the future?
I would say so. It's definitely the market where the KYC needs to take care of like much more than it's done so far. But I think we can't really stop the march of the Bitcoin.
I'm just curious, please.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So you were talking about you get this information from publicly listed registers, but because of 4AM multi and 5AM multi. But I know in the UK alone, the ERC and Company's House data is no one's verifying that. So how do you get around those stumbling blocks? So how do you make sure that that data is correct?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Happy to answer that. As we are connected, as I said, to 200 countries and jurisdictions, and this is one of the challenges, of course, is that every regulation, every jurisdiction is a little bit different, right? So if you are in a notary system where there's civil law, for example, in most of the continental European countries, before the information is put in the register, it is checked by a notary, and there might also be a commercial court judge that requests additional information before it is recorded. So that is information from a register with the highest level of veracity, right? So it has the highest level of trust. If you look at the UK model, for example, the information in the commercial register is only checked post-filing, right? So this doesn't mean that the information is correct, but this does mean that for company verification in that country, and you want to be compliant, or you want to make sure that your risk models are adapted to it, you will have to introduce secondary checks as well. So there would be additional information that might only be available from the companies themselves, or there might be other notarized information. But the baseline is to first check if the company exists, obviously, right, in a real-time fashion. And then go ahead and say, what is my risk-based approach as a financial institution or an insurer to say, oh, this company is in the UK, I have to add the second list of checks to go through, right? So it's not a, like when you're in the cross-border business, you also have to take a very high level of granularity based on the jurisdiction.
But going from what the last panel were talking, Corey's back here, so going from what Corey was talking, going from the know your customer of the last panel to the know your customer's customer seems to me, I mean, I'm not experienced in this area, but it seems to me to involve an enormous amount of complexity and expense. And I want some kind of reassurance that you guys are getting a handle on this with the technology. I mean, what is it that you're doing to make this? I mean, I understand you have all of these data sources and so on, but what are the processes that you go through to turn that data into actual kind of wisdom?
And maybe just to continue on that point, today, on AML level, on anti-money laundering level at European Union, you have to declare your UBO, ultimate beneficiary owners. Today, this information is only declarative. So companies must tell to the state which is their ultimate beneficiaries. So there is no check at the country level if this information is correct. What we do, and what we do with technology, is that we take public information, we take this information they receive on a state level, and we can use technology just to compare, to see where there is missing links, where there is missing information, and to rebuild this information. So today, technology can bring a solution to give better quality to the information.
Okay, so you're not just taking those public sources, you're doing something with the data to...
So in our sense, and maybe also going to your statement, what we do is make sure that it is consumable in an easy way, right? Because every jurisdiction is different, data sets are different, so we baseline it, make it easy to integrate into other systems, make it, I always call it, make it consumable, be it an application or a person, right? And because of that, and I think going back to your point, it's not just about the compliance part, right? It's also making sure that you can become more competitive in the market by using technology.
Right.
And there's some examples where we see that with our clients, where they're in the corporate investment banking side, they have cut their corporate client onboarding from 7,000 euros to 3,500 euros, and they've moved from a 6 weeks average for onboarding of a CIB to same day. And that means they can service their customers faster and be more competitive in the market. But I would say only most of the institutions are focusing on compliance fulfillment, not yet at looking at regulatory technology to be more effective in the market.
And also, they're not using that compliance as the form of any sort of new business model. It's just a cost. And they probably haven't, sort of, because of this link with digital identity, they probably haven't turned it into a business yet, which I would hope would be a little bit optimistic. Right, let me add some more complexity in then. So we've gone from know your customer to know your customer's customer, and we all understand the financial examples, bank onboarding and so on. I think we also understand some of the non-financial examples, the gig economy and Uber and so on and so forth. Actually, for people in the audience that don't realize, Uber just lost its license in London a couple of months ago because their KYC processes were flawed, and they lost their license for the whole of London because of a few thousand, I can't remember, out of millions were flawed. So it isn't just banks that need to, it's other people. Let me throw another level of complexity at you, which I hope you're going to be optimistic about. We're about to go from know your customer and know your customer's customer to know your customer's things. Because it seems to me the big change coming over the next couple of years in the enterprise area is it isn't just about companies and people anymore. It's about stuff. Like, companies need to know, is this, and to pick the hospital example that I was talking to somebody else about before, like you need to know, like, is this, where is the machine that we need to do X? Is it the real machine? Has it been certified? Has it been checked? And this kind of thing. And I'm not going to give you insurance unless I can see that these checks have been done, and that takes me into the world of zero-knowledge proofs and all this sort of stuff. So the level of complexity in this space, bad enough as it is already because of, is about to get a lot worse. I mean, a lot worse in the sense that that's also a business opportunity for you. So do you think the Internet of Things stuff is a real opportunity, or do you think it's still some way downstream, guys?
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite easy to give the passport to my refrigerator. But the real challenge is actually because the AI is taking over, so machine learning, and those machines are making decisions. So we need to know where they are and how they are manipulated. That is definitely the challenge of technology in the future, and it should be visible if machine is making decisions from my side.
So do you have that in any of your systems at the moment?
Well, I think we should not be too hung up on technology. We should also look at the reason why we do this. What are the drivers for this? And clearly, we're all looking for sustainable growth, ethical growth. We want to be in business with companies that have probity. And if we take the shipping company, the shipping business, for instance, not only do we track vessels, but now we're tracking also the containers on those vessels, and we need to also have a lineage about what those containers used to contain in the past, because those containers might actually be held, owned, managed by businesses that may have suspicious activities somewhere else in the world. So you, as a manufacturing company, you don't want to specifically entrust your hardware to a shipping company that would put your hardware into some containers that have been somewhat involved in previous times in non-licit businesses. Hence, this Internet of Things that you declared before, Dave, I think it's paramount that we fully understand the reason why we would do things. If there is no business purpose, I wouldn't see why we would develop and invest so much technology.
Well, let me give you a real example. In the US right now, John Hancock, one of the biggest life insurers, you can't buy a life insurance policy unless it's metered. In other words, you have to have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch. It isn't just more expensive. You can't have a life insurance policy unless you have the Fitbit or whatever that goes with it. In which case, knowing that it's your Fitbit suddenly becomes the core of the kind of business, because otherwise I would just take Cora's because she's very fit and healthy, and every time I needed to upload, I just use hers, right? So the identity of things. That's right. It's like you've meted it. But you see what I'm driving at. It's like we solve the people problem, which I think the last panel convinced me. We solve the KYCC problem, which I think you're convincing me. Then you just move it into a KYCCT problem, because people will just start tampering with the kit.
The advantage, if we speak about IoT, there is one standard which called IPv6, where each products are each own IP and each ID on a worldwide level. It's not yet the case at company level, so it's maybe a good idea just to think about how we can identify uniquely a company worldwide, because it's not yet the case and it's already the case with products and IoT products today because these addresses were standard and are universal. So maybe we can just take lessons there to have this one way to identify a company worldwide, but it's not yet the case.
And maybe if I may just add, right? I mean, we have a lot of topics here, right? And it's all about trust and transparency. We've seen now the first phase really is about digitizing and making sure we have the right data for the KYC, individuals.
And I think the previous panel convinced me that problem is solved.
KYB is really the next phase because it's a little more complex, because it's about the entities, cross-border, and the people behind, right? But I think the technology today is available and it's being deployed by more and more financial institutions or regulated industry, but also outside, suppliers, supplier networks, etc. We got that covered, right? And the transparency, as you're also saying, on one hand has to be, that would be the next phase, is like the identity of non-companies, non-natural persons, right?
That's
and how do you tie that in? But it's still again about transparency. But I think here we're not allowed to forget there's always going to be the human factor.
No, but
the
if
human factor is if you are not wearing your Fitbit, for example, or the containers are mixed around. We see that in a lot of the large ports. There will always be means and people that are the human factor trying to manipulate the system. That will not go away. The question is, can you identify it and how long does it take you?
Yeah. No, where I was going with that question was, if I'm one of the people in the audience and I'm thinking of like some fintech ideas and what am I going to do, you know, we said on stage this morning, you know, it isn't so much fintech where the action is actually, it is regtech because that's where all the costs are. So that's the next $1 billion opportunities for companies out there. But now I'm starting to think, well, but what about this kind of whole IoT space and the identity of everything else? Because surely if you're a little startup now, that's a pretty fruitful area to begin to explore, isn't it? I mean, it's not a problem you guys have solved.
It's a matter of technology. It's if it's neat, it will happen. Definitely the technology can solve pretty much everything besides bringing back the dead people. And maybe in 10 years we can do that one as well. So it's right now we don't really see the huge need for that. And
I'm going to make it. That's a great idea for a panel next year, which is how do you reallocate identities to people that you've brought back from the dead? That will show people that we're thinking ahead in this space, in my opinion. So, IoT.
Yeah, I just think about it this way. So, definitely there is some technology. Definitely there is people who is moving that direction. I know we have an Estonian Technology Institute is working quite hard with that, but there is no actual business need so far. So if we can find it out, we can capitalize that, then those startups, those technologies will be shown.
If I say, like, for the average person in this room, I bet the average person in this room already has far more IoT things because they don't think about these things as IoT, but everybody has Alexas and Fitbits and all this sort of stuff. So managing that data already seems to me to be an incredible problem that isn't fixed and is only going to get worse. So as an opportunity to extend and embrace from your businesses, that would be a natural place to go, right?
Well, I think it is one direction to go, right? However, even if we have Internet of Things and there's certain different parts of the value chain and connected devices, it'll still be owned by somebody. So I think that it will not go a direction that there's just an identity of things, but more who has the ownership of it, who has a jurisdiction of it, looking at like the container vessel.
Who has the authorization to access.
Who has the authorization, right? Because today you have companies who are obviously, from a legal perspective, are a legal person, right? And you have individuals, so people, who also have certain rights and so forth, the representation. Things today don't have their own rights.
It has to evolve in that direction, otherwise we won't be able to manage the authorization of it. Right, so now let's move on to the final part of the discussion, which is the discussion that everybody in the room wanted to get to, which is, at the moment, all of this seems like an enormous cost, and we only do it for compliance purposes. And one of the reasons why that's so problematic is because that cost is just sunk. We don't do anything with it. And one of the areas where I think some of the stuff you guys are working on is sort of interesting to me is at the corporate level, taking that KYCC and not just making it a tick box compliance cost, but actually turning it into an enabler for some new business growth, new business processes, new ways forward. That seems to me to be a fruitful way of thinking at the enterprise level as well. So what do you see going on in that space?
There's a wealth of drivers here because, yes, indeed, we want to be able to turn compliance cost into a business opportunity, and I think we've already alluded to some of those potentials. There's also the ethical side of things. And ethics is, in our view at Altares, also a virtuous movement enabler, whereby if I can work in an ecosystem that is properly managed, properly sanitized, my suppliers have been screened, I know they operate diligently, and my suppliers' operate in the same way, by default, we will also get rid of, some businesses that are not so legit. And this will also impact positively my reputation as a business, and I can then bring value to this reputation.
Can you give us a couple of examples where you see some possibilities here?
Yes, on another point of view, for me, mutualization is also quite important on that.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning, for example, when we have cases in Belgium, for example, with KYC, we have banks just to work together to build a KYC or a KYS utility. So the idea just there is to share information, share private information they have with public information, just to reduce costs and develop for them new ways to handle these problems.
Maybe just that, and I think what we're seeing in Belgium is essential also to ensure that we have a common reporting, common data sets, and maybe even a standard, right? Because today there's a lot of siloed regulatory technology and identity systems, etc. But if we really want to make sure that we can operate it globally, cross-border, there has to be standards in place rather than only proprietary, even numbering systems, right? There has to be a way to have identifiers that allow the interoperability. And I'm not talking about unified identifiers, because that will never exist in my opinion, but they have to be compatible so you can actually connect other networks to have the full value chain, the full supply chain, and the customer life cycle based on data sets that are interchangeable.
Am I right in thinking, though, that the people that have those data sets will be Google and Facebook and Amazon and Microsoft? So like they will be the people that have the big picture of all of your data, not just the siloed parts in the enterprises that you're talking about.
Yeah, but having a piece of data which is publicly available over the net doesn't mean that that data is trustworthy. So there's an element of sanitization, as I said earlier on, and correlation that is paramount to making sure that there is value behind the data and that the data can be used in our business processes in a trustworthy manner.
And you think there's some growth possibilities there?
Yeah, it's definitely the issue that the people, they have like the different sites, and I'm a different person in Facebook, different person in LinkedIn, different person in Tinder if I would use it. So it's
everybody uses
and
it.
yeah, you can't really put that picture together because that is too much private information in one side. I think if you're thinking about like the KYC,
It's okay to say he's not really on Tinder. He was just joking.
don't Google me.
No, he's a good-looking guy, I know, but
Yeah.
if you could just focus, it would. Thank you, please.
So if you talk about the people's genetics, then it changes like we was talking in the first panel, but the company's one is changing like not in daily, but like in minutes. And sometimes, if you like the example from real life, the factoring companies selling out invoices, and you have to know in exact millisecond who can sign out that invoice.
But no, I agree with you about that. But the point is that should be a service that's provided to me by somebody I trust, like my bank or something like. I would expect that to be part of the bank package that they provide to me as. And I don't see banks or other people in that space going anywhere near this sort of thing yet. It seems so far away in practice.
Yeah, but we speak also about legal information. So, from my point of view, it must be the state who give this stamp on the information who is legal. You cannot give this responsibility to Facebook or Google to just attest that the information you give to an authority is a legal one.
And I can only agree to that, because you do need an accepted legal entity, be it the state, to issue an identity, right? Or to have a framework for it, and also ensure the enforcement should somebody try to manipulate that. If you would give that to a tech company, a private enterprise, you will not have the enforcement.
Not only that, the entity per se evolves over time as well. So we're moving from this snapshot that we take at any given point in time into this movie analogy, where we need to make sure that the entities we're dealing with are being put under monitoring to understand their profile behavior over time. And a company or an entity that would be properly acceptable at some point might become a business I don't want to do business with later on down the line.
Yeah. So I guess what you're saying, the neutrality of the institution that issues the identity or manages it is essential.
That is essential, yes.
Okay, so let's finish on an optimistic note for the audience here. You're clearly making some progress in this space, although I personally feel there's a lot of places to go here yet. If we come back here in 3 or 4 years' time, what are you guys going to be working on? What's the main problem you see coming next that you're going to focus on?
Please.
Don't give away anything top secret, just a big picture for the audience.
Should we go one by one?
Yeah, thanks for going first, giving all away. But definitely, it's not going to be the challenge from technology. It's going to be a challenge from legal side and growth, and actually letting the world know what is doable in that area. So even if you talk about the first line banks, they're not changing rapidly. It takes 5 years to get something like that done in City or Barclays or one of those. So we start slow, but we will definitely change the world, because it's a huge cost for the companies right now, and they are not even compliant to do that anymore.
Anyone else want to say what they're going to be working in?
Yeah, maybe yesterday on stage, EBF, European Bank Federation, was asking for one central point to manage AML, anti-money laundering, because it's also linked to compliance and company ID.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that next.
And for me, it will be maybe the next step banks must do is really to work on a more European level, worldwide level, to just build the best tools to fight against these compliance problematics. Yes.
And I think if we come back in 3 years, what we're going to see is that the regulators themselves will also play an active part and also demand that technology is used in order to manage the clients at a financial institution. I think it will be a requirement, not just a compliance requirement.
And I think we'll also add new facets to compliance, such as corporate and social responsibility, carbon footprints. All those elements will come into play because of the nature of the world and how it's evolving at this point in time.
Thank you very much. Listen, guys, same as before, they didn't know what questions I was going to... In fact, they thought I was going to ask them some completely other questions. So they did even better than you thought they would. But they gave you honest answers from a position at the forefront of the industry. I hope you appreciated listening to them as much as I did. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.